Good morning, everybody. This is Rama on Writing with an author interview with Tom Pitts. He has just gotten the hard copy of his book called Secret Choices, and you can see it in the background. He's going to hold it up in a second. You know, I think that this is the biggest the biggest step in this whole process is when you have your book in hand. And I remember opening up my box, and of course, I took pictures and put them on Facebook. And as soon as I did that, I sold a bunch of books because I had kind of teased my audience for a long time with different parts of the book. And so when it was available, they were all excited to buy it. And Tom has worked with Tom Bird for a long time. He was in the early retreats. I think Abby and Tom were in some of Tom Bird's early retreats in Sedona. And at that point in time, they were 8-day retreats. And then the retreats became 5-day retreats. And now they're 3-day retreats. And I know that the 3-day retreat, we're getting a lot more done than in any of the 5-day retreats I attended. I suspect that it may be the same with the 8-day retreats as we've figured out what to do. One of the thoughts that we've had this year, and I'm not sure if we'll pursue it this year or next, was to actually go back to several 5-day retreats so that the authors could get the book written and totally revised in 5 days. So it wouldn't be the old 5-day retreat where we screwed around for 3.5 days of it. It would be the new 5-day retreat where we work hard for 4.5 days and get that book totally ready to move into the review process of publishing. So I'm excited about that. I've always felt that this is the direction that we could pursue. And I mean, it would be so cool to get a book totally done in 5 days, not just first draft. It would be a phenomenon. Not to say it's not a phenomenon now. Well, anyway, I'm going to unmute Tom here. Oh, let me see. There, Tom is unmuted. Tom Pitts, tell us who you are and how it feels to hold your book in hand.
Okay, hasn't quite sunk in holding the book in hand. How that is. I ordered full proof, and I kind of walked around with the book from Create Space, the package. Like, should I savor this moment or to open it or what? And finally, I just opened it. And it was kind of surreal, like, kind of oh, well, yeah, of course it's there. And then it's like, oh my God, there it is. So mixed emotions there. And who I am, of course, who really knows who they are and all that. So let me read the biography from the back page to give you a quick. I think I really like the way it came out. It's just a short bio about the author. Tom is the youngest of 4. He grew up in a farm in Indiana with his brother and 2 sisters. He served as an infantry sergeant in the Vietnam War and was honorably discharged December 15th, 1969. For the next 20 years, he held jobs ranging from installing steam boilers to night manager of a clothing store. In 1990, Tom moved to Arizona, where he began writing. He wrote for and performed in theater troupe, which examined how violence impacts our lives. He dabbled with stand-up comedy, performed improvisational theater, and acted in independent films. In 1995, he earned a B.S. in engineering from Northern Arizona University. He now lives in Page Springs, Arizona, where he tends his sustainable garden and continues to write. Now, that was an exercise, just writing that. I wrote a longer bio for the Author Central Amazon webpage. But I think it was pretty hard to write that, to sum up to life and get the gist of it, and not just facts, but get some kind of a feel to who I am. And that started to write was I wrote for a life coach a few things, and they said, you're a really good writer. And then Tom Bird's ad came up about a week after he arrived in Sedona for one of his one-night introductory seminars. And within 10 minutes of him taking the stage, he had us all writing, which I liked, No messing around, just start writing. And I've been intermittent, but I really haven't stopped. So I'm going to post, just send up something on the chat here to my email and website. There you go.
Well, I asked Tom if he would be willing to read a couple of passages from his book, because I think that, that's something that we've kind of missed out on with most of the author interviews that I do. And I just thought it would be real interesting to build that in as a component. And so I do appreciate that Tom took right to that by reading his author bio. I think that he's right when he mentioned that, writing the author bio and the book blurb are really hard exercises for us, because we're talking about ourselves, and we struggle with that. Do I sound too arrogant? Am I explaining enough? We all have, different opinions of ourselves, and this is a struggle. And that's one of the reasons why I like to do these author interviews, to give the author an opportunity to speak about themselves and about their book. One of the things that Tom Bird mentioned to me, and we've done this with varying degrees, is that when the professionals are interviewed on the talk shows, the professional authors, what they do first is they talk about themselves, not their book. They kind of talk about their interests, and they, kind of make jokes about stuff, and, kind of take it light so that you become familiar with who they are. Because if you like an author's personality, then it's going to be easier for you to purchase their book. So anyway, Tom, why don't you read a couple of passages from your book, and then we'll move on to the next step, where you're going to tell us about all the other books that you're in the process of writing, and what your plan for the future is going to be. So you're on.
Okay. Yeah, and that what you just said about talking about ourselves, that's our brand, right? I'm my brand, and I found through actually the improv theater, and the more I revealed about myself, the closer to the truth I came about myself, the more people appreciated. And also, we have to avoid starting the story where we look good. So when we're telling the truth about ourselves, there's some skeletons and some things we don't want to tell. And that's a big part of this book. And I'm going to read a passage here. The chapter is Death Ground. And my book goes from the present tense, the present 1985 story. And it just has back in Vietnam. And this chapter reveals a defining moment for me. It's a fictionalized account of one of the things I don't want or didn't want anyone to know I did, or about, the darker side we have, and the darker side of soldiers, which we hardly ever talk about. So this is the very end of the chapter, and we have just practically burnt down a village in a big firefight and ambush. He yelled into the mic, "Cease fire, cease fire. We're shooting at each other through the village. Cease fire." He was no longer afraid to die. He deserved to die. The last flare burned out. Starlight washed the silent huts. Sergeant Warden watched, detached at first, then immersed in what he had done. The men of Alpha Company lay behind the dikes in rice paddies and waited for the sun. At dawn, Alpha Company moved in to search the village. Without asking his lieutenant, Sergeant Warden took his squad into the village first. He walked point. He felt it was only right since he was responsible for what they were about to see. The first thing he saw when he entered the village was a mama-san on her knees, sobbing. Before he could walk past her, she raised up, her eyes locked his. "Tai Sao, Tai Sao." Why, why? Sergeant Warden knew the answer. He had lost his compassion. He had dehumanized the villagers. He had put the need to survive before anything else. Tom Warden knew the instant he keyed the mic and spoke the words, "I'm sure. Make the run." He had made a clear choice to abandon himself to the madness and survive at all costs. Sergeant Warden turned away and walked further into the village with a question of his own. Survival as what? Now there was a different fear. A fear of living with what he had done. He listened for that quiet voice he heard the last night. It was not there. In its place was a sobbing for something sacred that had died. The boy from Indiana, who just wanted to know what made the corn grow, was gone. The child was dead. The man was dead. He had not survived. Tom Warden felt the pride and shame of being a good soldier. Underneath that feeling, there was another. He could not go home. Not ever. So, after I got past that chapter, actually, a lot of the book was leading up to that chapter, and that was, after that, I could tell just about anything about myself. And this incident, even though it's fictionalized here, was actually informal investigation into war crimes. And the sad part, it was determined, hey, this was standard operating procedure. We called it overkill. It was just an insane reaction to actually only 3 VC firing on us from the village. And anyway, you'll see more about that from the book. But the whole book is based on digging and digging and digging and telling the truth about myself and ultimately the truth about soldiers in combat and what they have to live with when they come back. And the main story takes place in 1985. And my idea was to reveal through this Tom Warden's reactions and the things he did in 1985, and then a chapter back in Vietnam. And hopefully I learned, and the whole reader will learn, why we did some of the things we did because there's some more. There's another chapter if I get a chance to read towards the end of the book that it shows how it illustrates that. Okay.
Tom, it sounds like you learned a lot about yourself as you wrote this book. Did it? I mean, how traumatic was this for you to write?
Well, it was pretty traumatic, but I had learned some methods actually through writing with Tom for that many years. There was a lot of catharsis in the first book I wrote with him, 1991. But I'd learned some methods of actually processing that emotions that came through. Like 5 years ago, 10 years, even, especially 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to read that. But there are certain things you do and also through the improv acting, you're able to do more of a Meisner method instead of method acting. In other words, you let the emotion flow through and don't try to choke it off, or you get choked up. So it was, and I knew the book was going to be good when it was hard to write. Not the writing was hard to say what I had to say. I knew that, okay, this is some good stuff here. Because it always turns out that way. And there was a lot of compassion, I thought, that wasn't going to be there, that is there. I found compassion for myself, first experience from others. I learned to be compassionate with myself. And that's the super benefit of the writing process is, and why we love Gwen so much, is when as it clears that out. And without that, the breath work is great. I used to have to write for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then just run out the door and hike up a hill. Now, luckily, I lived on the edge of the Forest Service since I've been in Sedona, and I would just walk and walk and walk. And that would clear it out. Today, I just do some breath work before, during, and after writing.
Well, that's it's good to identify what helps, because I know that a lot of the authors deal with emotions of their story. Obviously, I don't think that any of us have had to deal with with being a soldier in war. I was very lucky in that by the time I turned 18, I was the first year that there was no draft. There was registration, but no draft for Vietnam. So. I admire your fortitude in serving and having to go to Vietnam. Tom, why don't you read another passage? I mean, you definitely did the job that Tom Bird has asked us to do. You wrote with passion, and you touched all of us in just that little passage that you wrote. So, you've accomplished what all of us are trying to accomplish, and that is touch our audience. So why don't you read us another passage?
Yeah. I will do that here. Let me respond to something about, I think a lot of people have experienced what I've experienced. The PTSDs, we think of, soldiers, but it's not. There are more individuals, men and women and children with PTSD than from like childhood abuse or adult abuse than our soldiers. And I thought my job as a soldier now is to relate very clearly. See, I have a clear trauma, whereas I've talked to some other men and women who their trauma wasn't so clear, and it went on for so long, not just a year. So I included a character of Sarah, Tom's the love of his life. And I tried to present some of her trauma also. And hopefully the reader will get, not intellectually, but just get the feel of, hey, trauma is trauma. It doesn't. The soldier, especially the Vietnam soldier, provided a good lab rat, for lack of a better word, a place to investigate clearly trauma and its effects. It was a good demographic. So anyway, okay, here we go. We're looking for the passage, Homecoming. This takes place a few months after our protagonist returns from Vietnam, and it illustrates some of the secret choices, actually. He's just been talking with his father, and then Tom escaped down the stairs and into the basement. He wanted to be out there, walking. He took his father's shotgun from behind the furnace room door where it always was. He took the box of number 812 shotgun shells from the shelf. He put 5 or 6 rounds in his coat pocket while it was still hanging on the hook where he had left it 2 years ago. He put the coat on and tried to think of what that other man would do. He tried to feel what that other man had felt 2 years ago. It wasn't any use. He didn't feel who he was, now or then. All Tom felt was an almost uncontrollable urge to walk through the fields with a weapon. His cover was that he was going pheasant hunting, like he had always done, but this was entirely different. What Tom knew for sure is that he was going to walk out into empty fields with a loaded weapon. Then he would feel normal, feel okay, almost safe. Nothing more, nothing less. So this whole chapter is to illustrate how he came home a stranger and he wanted to act like that man left 2 years ago. So, and it just wasn't the same. And everybody looked at him and talked to him like he was the same guy that left for Vietnam. But of course he wasn't. And that was, only through the story can I explain what that feels like. Now I'm going to go to I want to go to a page, where I hope we can get some sense of another person's trauma. It's called Leaving the Garden. Yep. I have to go to them. So, and I wanted to hopefully for the pace of this book, we just came out in the writing, that the reader would feel what I was feeling, or the protagonist was feeling, which would ultimately be on 53. The wrong chapter. Bear with me here. This chapter is called Leaving the Garden, and it's where Sarah talks to her best friend about the relationship between Tom Warden and her. Sarah has just left the abortion clinic, and she went over to her friend's house and not back to Tom. Okay. Sarah, that's Tom's lover at the time. Laura is her aunt and confidant. Sarah looked at her hands folded in her lap. I had the abortion this morning. The two women allowed the silence. They waited for the garden to absorb what had just been said. Sarah drew a breath. Laura asked, "Can you talk about it?" They were all very nice, very professional. I thought I was ready. Sarah ran her fingers into her hair and held her head. They put a tube in me and started to suck the fetus. The thing inside me was being sucked out, like there would be nothing left of me when they were done. She picked up her notebook and held it in her lap. What's that? Something I wrote before you got here. Sarah tore a page from the notepad and looked at it. Laura asked, "Can you share?" Sarah held out the slip of paper. Laura took it and read silently. Once a faint and fragile light you gave, like the moonbeam, for a moment you were mine. Then, unwanted, your soul wandered on, perhaps to another time, another place. And now, forever, I will never know your face. This is beautiful, Sarah. She handed the paper back. Will you read it to Tom? I don't think so. Why not? Sarah looked at Laura, then through her. Tom and I have suffered enough. No matter, excuse me, no matter where we touch each other, we always find a scar. The slip of paper fell from Sarah's fingertips. As it fell, a whirlwind came through the garden and carried the poem over the grapevines toward Tinkham Pond. So I tried to catch the trauma of another person in there, and to show the universality of what a soldier goes through is really like I said, a ground for the psychiatrists and the therapists and everyone to somehow find a way through for those suffering with PTSD. And one of the things that kept me pushing through this book is when I would tell these stories on stage, just fragments and stuff, people would say, "Oh my God, my brother, now I understand my brother," or a friend whose father was in the Canadian Army and was in World War II. He was there for the duration, 6 months. He said, now I understand. Now I understand my dad. And that pushed me, kept pushing and pulling me through the hard times when I just wanted to quit and run screaming from the house, you know. So, and the reaction I'm going to get is just needles and pins. Some people are going to, some of the soldiers are going to, I know they're going to be upset because I revealed our dark side, and they just want to be, oh, we're all heroes and welcome home. And it's, you can't heal unless you tell it all, I think. Excuse me. Over to you, Rama.
Tom, you're writing a couple other books at this point in time. Do they all deal with PTSD, or what else are you writing about?
Okay, I'm feeling an evolution in my writing. The next book is the rough draft is finished, and it's really rough, and it's called working title. Probably the final title will be Paper Dragons. And the storyline isn't quite as clear, but it has to do with the mental illness aspect of PTSD, and there's always a mixture, you know. People, there's always what they call comorbidity. It's never simple. People like myself who've been diagnosed with manic depressive, or what they call bipolar disorder now, are more susceptible to PTSD. So, and at first, that reaction to trauma is normal, and we associate and do all that stuff, but we get through it and move on. Only when it stays with us and we don't process through do they call it a disorder. Now, the next book is still Tom Warden, and takes place after Frequent Choices, but it delves into more his mind, almost a little kind of a sci-fi uh, feeling to it. I have to get through the rough draft, but it delves completely into the experience of PTSD. The uh, the protagonist at this time is, let's say, dysfunctional, not a functioning part of society. His reactions are totally bizarre, and without any explaining, uh, what I'm hoping to do is let people inside the mind of someone who is working up on a roof and just totally blanks out and starts to remember an incident of trauma, and then starts making up stories in their head of how that might have come out differently, and then sees you know someone out on the road, and starts making it up anyway. It's inside the mind of it's like being John Malkovich meets Platoon. I don't know. Something like that. The next book, the third book, which I started writing last weekend with I added two. I had started it, golly, last year and just dropped it. But what was started to come out at the writing retreat was more storyline, more of that skeleton, how that book would develop and finish. And it is going to be more of a straight up novel. And no war stories, and just draw from hopefully draw from the techniques and things I've learned about writing, just to write a story similar to I strive to be like Hemingway and Steinbeck, but I want to write something like The Sun Also Rises. Well, that's not quite it, but more on that line of a novel, and just have the triumph and tragedy of being human in that novel, without any war stories or that. Not based on any one incident in my life. So I'm anxious to make that transition as an author, because there's so many out there with, like the guy who wrote The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. He dug deep to write that, and then I think he stopped digging deep. So so I want to that in that next book, Paper Dragons, is deep. It's just nice, really written from the heart. And the third novel, I'm going to call it Stillwater. Which is interesting. There's a Stillwater River in Secret Choices, and I think I'll head around and later. But Stillwater's a little town, and there's orphans, and there's people who mysteriously show up in town, and yada yada yada. So it's a nice storyline, it's a bit of a murder mystery, but murder mystery psychodrama, but it's got to develop that. And I want to make that transition from a one-hit wonder. I'm assuming this Secret Choices is going to be some kind of a hit, but and it's very essential to write for sure a second book. Absolutely a second book. It really should be a third book. 3 books out there, and I'll have what I call making a good run at being an author. And that's the only way I'll really know whether it would work for me. And I think that's the only way I can get it, know myself that, yes, I've fully developed as an author. I could see where I've come and go. It's kind of like you were good at tennis in high school. You were good at golf. Now you try the amateur tour, and you say, "Hey, I'm good enough to make a try at the pros." So you go make a try at the pro. prose, and you go at it long enough to know where you stand. So 2 books to go to know where I stand.
Tom, thanks for that comment, because I think that that's real critical. Um, we do need to give it our best shot. And as I've read online about what you can do to promote your book, the biggest number one comment I've seen is to write book 2, write book 3. And my question is, has the writing gotten easier as you've gone through this process? And do you feel that, now that you actually are holding book 1, that the level of confidence that you have has, increased substantially?
Yes, definitely easier to write. Now, like I said, less frightening to dig deep and put the joy and the sorrow on the pages. And the confidence, yeah, that's part of it. And a big part of it is like, oh, yeah, I can do this. And I don't feel like a fraud anymore, and I don't have to have quite as much blind faith as that a book will come out of this. I have the rough draft handwritten. I have the first typed in version. I have all the additions, and now I can sit back. It's over here on my writing desk in stacks. I can look over there and see the evolution of this book. And I know all the excuses, all the shortcuts that aren't really there. I've taken a lot of shortcuts, and that, of course, gone back and to where I should have stayed and gone through the steps. And now I kind of know when I want to break a rule. I know the rule I'm breaking and why I'm breaking it, and it's okay. So it gets quite a bit easier, I would say, and I get more done, and I'm not afraid so much to sit down. There was always that fear. You wake up in the morning, and it happened just this morning. What am I thinking? I can't do this. Of course I can, because there it is. And I think this book will have some sort of success. I don't know what that will be like. And really, it actually took me 3 years to get this in print. It took me 12 years to get a book in print before I could get past everything, every fear and excuse there was. And I just had to make that personal growth before I could endure that vulnerability of putting myself out there. And if I wasn't afraid to publish the book, I always say, if you're not afraid somewhat for the exposure, it's not that good a book, So there's the pull now also, all the expectations of telling everybody I got a book and I got a book, and they start asking me, where's the book? And now with a book in print, and by the way, I haven't gone on to CreateSpace and says approve the print copy, so it won't be up there till Monday. So it'll be listed as available, out of print, but not available yet. So Monday it will be up. I think it's super important to move through as fast as you can. And it took me 3 years. It was a 5-year retreat. I wrote the rough draft, got it to a style editor. It took me a while to get it to a style editor. That came back. I started to make the changes slowly. And a year to the date, I went into a 3-day seminar and made all the additions. I had about 33,000 words to start. And I wrote another 25,000 words with the inspiration of the style editor, what's missing. And I fleshed out that book on the second seminar. And that was, then went to what I call a line editor for grammar and punctuation and checking the flow of the timeline, make sure something assumed, talking about something that happened that hadn't happened yet and all that. I got a very good line editor for that. And so and I continued to get into the author within state to make some of those changes. And most of it were just shifting around and additions. I resisted the temptation to change lines and delete lines. I just added. That's all I did, added. And I added probably 800 words on Sarah, because that was a big hole. We don't know enough about Sarah. It's a big part of Tom Warden's life. And that was a stretch, because to write about how a woman felt. And so Tom kissed me, says, "You sure you're not gay? You write so well how a woman would feel." I said, that was a backdoor compliment. So anyway, all the writing is definitely personal growth, and I don't think that's kind of the hardest part. We don't want to change. We want to sit back on our laurels. And all change, I think, is pain, but it doesn't have to be suffering. So it took me a year to get that done. And then I was ready to go to copy edit and all that, proofread. I could have published probably 6-8 months ago. But there was a process, a strictly emotional and maybe spiritual process I needed to go through to get me to this point. And one of the things is I spent the money with Tom and Rama. I said, "Okay, I'm ready to go. I want to commit," and I put some skin in the game, and that made a big difference for about 3 or 4 months. And then I couldn't tell myself, "Oh, I spent all this money, I got to publish." It just that motivation didn't work anymore. So you kind of speed and time are the essence. So the least amount of procrastination we can do as authors is the best. And at the same time, hey, it took me this long, and I think tenacity is probably my lifesaver. I remember, God, and it's amazing how the story comes back that wasn't even in the book. It was about my second week in Vietnam and my first 2 days out in the field. We were on a company sweep through, it was still very muddy, and we're sweeping through the canals. And I was the new guy. I was a sergeant, but I was still the FNG, pardon my French, the fucking new guy. And pretty much everybody ignored me. And we were going through the mud was knee deep, and the water came up chest high as we was moving through. And finally, somebody, the RTO, turned around, actually company commander, says, "Hey, somebody help Sergeant Puetz. He's stepping in all the holes." And there was a sense of where there was clumps of vegetation underneath the water that you could feel and step to. And then there was places where you would go right down to your knees. And I was struggling, and I thought I was in good shape, but ended up at the end of the entire line of troops going to the canal to get on the rag boats, we called them, to take us out of there. Not choppers, but just like LSTs. And they all got to be about 50 feet in front of me, and they were all loading up on the rag boats, and I was 50 feet away. Everybody was cheering, "Come on, Sarge!" And I was spent. I was hit the wall quite a bit, and was long past my second wind, and I could just feel this target on my back, because if if there was any VC out there, they sure as hell knew we were there. And it was just Nipopom short brush. It wasn't jungle. And I could just feel a target on my back saying, please God, not my second day. And tenacity, I don't know how I walked to them rag boats. I don't know what LIG stands for, but I made it and just drug myself aboard. I mean, mud from here to almost head to toe. I just wouldn't quit. And it was just days like that. I just wouldn't quit. And through all the PTSD and everything, when I felt like, what's the use? I just wouldn't quit. And that's finally what got the book published. I wouldn't quit. It was like, this is what I set out to do 12 years ago. And it was something in me. And people actually kept saying, you need to tell this story. Every little bit I would share, as the years went on, I would share more and more. And the more I shared, the more people tried to pull out of me. So there's two things I feel like I need. I owe the guys back in Nam, and owe everybody who has trauma in their life. I owe them this story so they can hand that book to say, here, read this. You can understand me now. There's that. And then I got to admit it, I want to be a goddamn best-selling author. I like being on stage, and that I want that. And people say, oh, you can't do it for yourself. Yeah, I can. Some days I push on because, damn it, I want to be a success. I want the island life, the island lifestyle, which brings me to part of being bipolar, manic depressive. This, okay, is the island life in the center. That's not my calendar. I have island life in the center, and all the little things, like right today, spend 10 minutes on tweets. Those are the things I can do right now, and as I go farther out, the bigger chunks are there, like finish book 2. If I think about finishing book 2 and then going on to book 3, I just, like you said, get overwhelmed. So I have there's the island lifestyle, and all the little things I can do today: wash the dishes, send out some tweets, breathe. Those are what gets me through the day. I just keep at those, and then I can feel, oh yeah, right behind it here, okay, there's a newsletter I can write. That's a little bit bigger, but I don't like those square calendars with days on them. It's just most of the time where I live, there's no time and space, doesn't really exist. So I like that spiral. I'm going to make a bigger one. I got my big poster boards. I'm going to make a big spiral, and that's my to-do list. And wherever I am on that spiral is, for that moment, is fine with me. Over to you, Rama.
Tom, thank you for sharing, your story. I think the tenaciousness is, we all have that in us, or we wouldn't be here writing our books. But I think it's important to be reminded that that's really what it takes to get through. I'm going to open up the forum. If anyone's got any questions for Tom, you can unmute yourself and ask them. And if not, we'll end the day and be back in a couple of weeks. So it's. Tom, I think
I've got everybody's speaking.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Tom, I am so moved. And this morning I watched a Navy SEAL video of a guy who had that message of tenacity too. And when you talked about that just now, it was like, wow. There's a message there today for me.
Good.
in the writing and in the living. So thank you.
You're so welcome. It makes me feel like it was worth getting up today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a story. And I'm sure that no one that hasn't experienced that, this would give them a chance to experience remotely what that would be like and get, the big thing I try to look for is try to understand what people have been through. And you see somebody walking up the street and you go, you look at them, but it's like, it's so important for us as we move forward into the new world we're creating, that we allow for that understanding and expand our ability to understand exactly what someone has gone through. And so many times it's completely way outside what we could ever imagine from our own framework. So this book looks really good. I think it'll be fantastic. And I think that it's going to be a very important thing for people to have out there. So, writing the book, and you can hold it up and you go, here it is. And you'll be able to look at that book and like I do, and I go, I did it. There it is, regardless of what the next one seems like or anything else. You can go, there it is. I did it at least once. I can do it again. But I think what you talk about is so phenomenal. I think it'll be
Locked up.
Are we still on? Bill, your words got cut off.
It did?
Yeah, your last words. Anyway, thank you for what you just said, Bill. It was something to keep in mind every day, everywhere we go. I wanted to thank you, Tom, the depth of revelation of your person. I know you now, know something about you. Never would have really guessed. You said it all. I'm not going to spoil it with further words. Just want to thank you. It's amazing the depth of experience, the breadth of experience we have here in this group. So Tom just showed us another facet this morning. Thank you all.
Thanks, Tom. Actually, Tom Carroll had that experience of finding out, why did Tom Puetz react like that? I think that's part of what I'll talk to Carol later here, but I think that's part of what he was saying. And life with PTSD is like driving with the brakes on.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. So I signed up to get the free chapters, and so when is it coming out? It's coming out Monday?
A week. The print book, I have to click on Create Space, approve that.
Oh, okay.
And I just, I'll do that later today as I finish reading the rough draft.
Okay.
I'll probably just do it. I want to take a chance of having them try to make changes and not get it up there. So I think I'll just do that. So it'll be available. And I think, Bill, I'll just send everyone who signed up for the e-letter, I think I'll just send them an EPUB and a PDF of the whole book, not just a chapter. So I'll do that.
I'll still buy
it. Okay, great. Next couple of days. And that's another thing about finally getting them published out. It just demystifies the whole thing, some of the technicalities, and you figure out, like right now, there's probably some errors in there, but I'm not going to worry about it. We'll just put it up there because it's important to get the launch and get it out there. And next month, I'll have a lot of friends with the proof copies, like 3 of them actually, the red pen and the proof copy. And it doesn't cost anything to change it a month from now. And that's the big thing. That fear of, it's got to be absolutely perfect. It has to be pretty good. But I think like Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, I was at a time when I was copy editing, and I was going through that, reading it very critically. There's about 6 typos in there that probably I wouldn't have picked up on unless I was copy editing. And so I'm thinking, I'm cool. I'm good to go. Because we can hack at a book until it's just, there's no way to get it perfect. You're going to miss something. So I'm just going to get it up there and move on. And also, one of the things that I seem to be able to do is with this book is like, okay, it is what it is. If I try to, especially in the copy edit or the revision stage, you can muddy it up like doing an oil painting. You start messing with it, it's just going to get it all muddy, and you're just going to have to throw the painting out. So all the things I want to change about this book, I'll just employ in the next book. This chapter maybe could have been a little better here. It didn't quite come through. Well, I'll just write a better chapter in the next book, because I could spend another 10 years on this first book trying to get it perfect. And I'll never will be able to visit Rama in Hawaii.
The island life. Yeah.
I am coming, baby. One of us has got to be successful, because you're kind of living off the land there in Hawaii. We got to get some beachfront property. Rama staying up on a hill, he has to ride like 5 miles downhill to get to town, and then 5 miles back uphill to get home, which is good, except when you turn 60.
Well, coming back home is the hard part. I saw that Kathy looked like she wanted to say something, but I wasn't getting any audio through. You want to try again, Kathy?
Unmute yourself.
Well, it doesn't appear that she's muted up. She's on an iPad, and I'm just not sure exactly what to click to make the iPad work. So if you want to type something in, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we're going to move on. I just wanted to remind everyone that on Black Friday, Tom is going to be doing his Amazon launch. So if you can go to the Amazon listing, write a review, click a review, share on Facebook, share on Twitter, purchase his book. Whatever you can share would be helpful. You moved me a lot, Tom, today, so I want to thank you. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I will not be back next week or the week after, so we're going to have 2 weeks off, and then we'll be on for 2 weeks. And then we'll do the holiday, and then in January we'll be regular again, although January 8th we have our remote retreat. I know some of you will be on that. I just don't know if I'll have enough laptops in Hawaii to do more than the remote. So I'm not going to overcommit myself, which I usually do. Everybody, have yourself a good holiday. And next time I speak with you, I will be in Hawaii. So take care, everyone. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Pleasure.